We have a presidential election this Tuesday. Another one. If you've been counting, we've had 60 in the history of our country. I've lived through 17 elections, was born when Ike was president, and I have voted in 12 elections, casting my first ballot in 1980. I've lived through 13 American presidents, 7 Republicans, 6 Democrats, some good and some not so good. Like many of you, I'm a political junkie and I care about these things. Some of my favorite TV shows are still The West Wing, Madam President, and my guilty pleasure, House of Cards. Our happiness, our success, our families' lives are not governed by who's in the White House or who's in the governor's mansion. I care about elections deeply, but I'm not consumed by them. And this Wednesday, following an election, will be another day of working hard, paying our bills, practicing our faith, playing the piano, or maybe learning pickleball, loving our families, cherishing our friendships, and hopefully contributing to a better community and better country. And probably still trying to sort out what happened the day before. Here's the deal. Here's the deal.
But here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
And here's the deal.
Because here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
Here's the deal. I don't have room for people who are so consumed by elections and put political priorities and petty politics before personal relationships and friendships. Because our success and happiness do not depend upon who lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Hey, we've had a lot of rough, rocky, ruckus-filled elections, just like this one. But aren't most of them that way? But we keep having them every 4 years miraculously. And we will still survive and thrive if we choose to do so. Hey, our history is full of controversial and chaotic elections. Recall the fourth election in 1800, which was a rematch of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Looking back on two almost mythological figures in our history in a brutal, mud-slinging battle of truly dirty politics. The Jeffersonians condemned Adams as monarchical, really wanted to be a king, wanting to limit free speech and being not really, and they said this, not really manly enough to serve, and I quote, from the Jefferson camp, Adams has a hideous hermaphroditical character. Hermaphroditical, look it up. Ouch, crazy stuff. The Federalists with Adams said that Jefferson was more French than American. Son of a half-breed, was a secret atheist who wanted to take away Bibles and who needed to answer the swirling rumors about one of his slaves named Sally Hemings. A close election eventually led to an electoral tie between Aaron Burr, yes, that Burr, and Jefferson with 73 electoral votes each. There were brokered meetings, deals, some backroom influences by none other than Alexander Hamilton, which put Jefferson over the top, but the acrimony led to Aaron Burr killing Hamilton in a duel, shooting him at 20 paces, that's right, the good old days. But we still survived and thrived. How about the election of 1860? Talk about a divided country. A real civil war broke out after that election, and 750,000 people died. That's 2% of our country. Following the winner of that election, Abraham Lincoln, who garnered only 40% of the popular vote, and before taking the oath of office, he survived an assassination attempt. He had to sneak into Washington, D.C. for his inauguration, which by the time he was sworn in, 7 states had already left the Union. After a 4-year bloody civil war and our first presidential assassination, one of 4, we still survived and thrived, though the journey has not been easy. The election of 1876, 100 years after our independence, interesting candidates. The leading Republican for some time was a guy named James Blaine. He had been Speaker of the House, Secretary of State, a congressman, and a senator. He ended up not being the candidate for the Republicans, but he took the consolation prize of having a small town in northwest Washington, named after James Blaine. In this election, we had the largest turnout of a popular vote ever. 82% of eligible voters voted. And this was in response to a horrible financial crisis and depression called the Panic of '73. It was a highly disputed election when the first time the candidate with the most popular votes, that would be Samuel Tilton, the governor of New York, was edged out in a controversial decision with dirty backroom deals that took weeks to decide in favor of the Republican candidate, Rutherford Hayes, a war hero from Ohio. 185 versus 184 electoral votes, the closest ever since the Jefferson-Adams race, leading to the president's nickname, Rutherford Hayes. And by the way, during that election, the Republican camp accused the Democrats in the South of voter suppression and intimidation of black Southern voters. Sound familiar? Nothing new under the sun. But we survived and thrived, painfully at times, still not yet shedding our racist tendencies which we've had since the days of slavery. It was the election of 1876 that also led to the removal of federal troops from the South, thus strengthening the Klan and Jim Crow laws. Still we survived and thrived and moved forward. Think about the elections that took place during the Great Depression and 2 world wars when times were truly bad. Real life and death poverty in our streets, a world at war, the rise of Nazism, fascism, Japanese imperialism, and later on communism. We fought and we prevailed, we survived and we thrived. During all that, we still had elections to become the strongest nation ever on this planet by nearly any measurement. And think of it, since our founding, we've never not had a presidential election. That's pretty impressive. How about the 1960 election? John Kennedy versus Richard Nixon. The question was, could our country possibly elect a practicing Roman Catholic? It did by one of the smallest margins imaginable amidst multiple charges of election fraud in Texas and Illinois. The popular vote was very close. 49.7 versus 49.6%. About 113,000 voters separated them, about the population of Bellingham. And of course, then Kennedy became our 4th and hopefully our last president to be assassinated. I'm old enough to remember the election of 1968, which followed the assassination of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Add to that Vietnam and a chaotic Democrat convention full of riots in Chicago that year. Richard Nixon returned to politics and was elected president. Then there was Watergate. Jimmy Carter, a peanut farmer from Georgia, was elected president. He went through the Iranian hostage crisis. And by the way, Jimmy is still alive today at 100 years. Let's jump down to Gore versus Bush in 2000. 500 votes in the state of Florida decided the election, including the unfortunate involvement of the Supreme Court. An election that had Al Gore won his own home state of Tennessee, he would have become the 43rd president of the United States. The second George Bush was elected president. We had the 9/11 terrorist attacks, a major meltdown of the banking industry, and the collapse of the real estate market. But we survived and thrived, and is there any doubt that our country just keeps moving forward? We then elected our first black president, not once, but twice. In 2016, Donald Trump won the Electoral College tally, but lost the popular vote to Mrs. Clinton, electing a very controversial president. We went through COVID-19, the George Floyd riots, the January 6th riots, when many Americans simply did not display their best. However, we still survived and we thrived. In 2020, in the largest voter turnout ever in terms of raw numbers, Joe Biden became our 46th president. And so we are on the verge of electing our 47th president during this most unique of election seasons. I don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday and what the headlines will say on Wednesday morning. And I don't mean at all to minimize the seriousness and important issues that are on the ballot as represented by these candidates. Their experiences, their characters, their visions and priorities we should consider carefully and vote accordingly. So let's circle back. We do not center our lives around elections. Neither do most of my friends, whether they are left-handed or right-handed. We will survive and thrive if we choose that future for us. So in the words of Warren Buffett, the so-called Oracle of Omaha, at 94 years of age, a truly remarkable financial person and investor, he says, never ever bet against America. So on Tuesday and following, there will be winners and losers, happiness and heartache, progress and setbacks. But we'll survive, we'll thrive if we choose to do that. Don't forget to vote this Tuesday, and please complete your entire ballot. Thank you for watching.